I'm probably sitting there with my little boy. Go over there right there. Have you seen anybody? Shit, I can say whatever. I know. I can.
The Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards, every Thursday at 6:15 on Goliath Radio. Gwen Azama-Edwards, retired city clerk, former city commissioner, city of Daytona Beach. The Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards on Goliath Radio.
Stan, you've been sitting much too long, much too long. Welcome, 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 welcome to Truth, a radio program designed with you in mind, a program whose sole purpose is to empower you, our listeners, for information leads to knowledge, and knowledge is, you got it, power. And as always, I want to empower you to take control of your life, those things that impact you, your family, and your community. As always, too, I want you to go to the website at www.gwen-truth.com so you can access all of those powerful, powerful resource listings and the links that link you to the even more powerful information that will make you, as I said, all powerful. Go to the website too so you can take part in the poll that we have, and I just put up a new one. And that new poll is asking you whether or not you believe that Obamacare will actually help those who are in need of affordable health care coverage. Go on the website so you can chime in on that query, www.gwen-truth.com. As has been stated, I'm Gwen Azama-Edwards, former city commissioner, retired city clerk, city of Daytona Beach, author, minister, community volunteer extraordinaire. I give a lot of time and glad to do so. It's like paying forward, right? That's what we do. That's what we do for those who care, those who are compassionate and passionate about doing God's work, doing work and helping others. Amen. And that may be the last one I'll say for tonight. Big John hates for me to do that, as I'm sure you're aware. Anyway, we do welcome you all tonight. And my guest tonight, by popular demand, is, of course, Larry T. Edwards, former Daytona Beach Police Chaplain, and he now is an employee with the State Attorney's Office. And our good friend as well, Louie Mercer, who is a Director of Emergency Services with Daytona State College. And we're going to talk tonight about law enforcement, then and now, or yesterday and today, and about some of the training opportunities that are available for those of you who would like to go into that profession, which Louie Mercer can talk to you very well about, because that training is available at Daytona State College at the Advanced Technology or Technical College, used to be Advanced Technology Center. But Louie can share that, and perhaps that would be a good place to start, Louie, to talk about training that is available, and not just in terms of the coursework, but we know that it really takes a lot, in my opinion, to be in law enforcement. It takes a lot to be a law enforcement officer. In particular, one of the individuals that has their feet on the ground, so to speak, when it comes to being out there and defending and protecting all of us and protecting the community. So what are some of the training, not just in terms of coursework, but generally coursework, and other types of training that a law enforcement officer is provided, and in addition to that, the qualifications that are required to enter the program and become a law enforcement officer?
Well, good evening, all y'all. How are you tonight? My name is Louie Mercer, and I work at Daytona State College. I've got some experience in law enforcement in training law enforcement because previously I worked for the city of Daytona Beach. I was a police commander with Daytona Beach Police Department for 22 years and retired. Retired on a Friday and took the job at the college training young police and correctional officer recruits that very next Monday. So I come with a lot of experience in policing, a lot of experience in training police officers, and really my lifetime hope and wish was to be a police officer. And while a police officer, my lifetime goal was to be the training center director at the college. So just really worked out great. I'm glad to be serving in that capacity now. I've been doing that for 15 years as a training center director. And policing is still a very, very difficult profession. It's still a difficult thing to get into once you're in it. It's a very, very challenging job, and it's also challenging to stay in it. What we do at Daytona State College is we do the basic recruit training programs, and those are the programs, Gwen, that folks need to take in order to be able to sit for the state licensure exam in law enforcement. So there's just like in policing itself, in the training of policing, it's a pretty big process that you have to go through. It's a restricted entry program, which means not just everybody can get in. And let me tell you why. Some of the reasons are that you have to be 19 years of age, you have to have a high school diploma, you have to not have been dishonorably discharged from the armed forces. In addition to that, you can't have been convicted of any felonies, or you can't have been convicted or found guilty of any charges involving perjury or false statements. And you also have to have what's known as good moral character. So what the college ends up doing is we do a basic background check on recruits that come through, and they have to meet all of these statutory requirements in order to even be considered for the school. We run probably about 200 police officer candidates through a year at the college, just in this area. We do also fire and EMT and paramedic and correctional officers. So it's a big program. Kids have to come in, Gwen, and if they don't meet these basic requirements, we screen them. We either tell them what they need to do to meet them, or we try to refer them to some job that might be better suited for them.
We don't usually, and I know a lot of places, they don't like to talk about the cost of something. I know if individuals are referred to you by a law enforcement agency, sometimes they will either pick it up once they're hired or do a reimbursement or something like that. Do you find a lot of your students and the applicants who apply actually end up paying their own way?
The majority end up paying their own way or getting some sort of financial assistance through financial aid, loans, grants, scholarships, family members, anything that they can do. The
sponsorship.
Well, sponsorship is another thing. Like, for example, right now in our current, we've got 3 basic law enforcement academies that are going on right now. 2 daytimers that have 30 in each, and 1 nighttime that has 30 in it. And there are a couple of employees that are from the sheriff's office, a couple from Daytona PD, and a couple from the beach department, ocean rescue, ocean safety. So they're in there, but the largest majority of them find either some sort of loan grant, tuition, scholarship, or financial aid, or they pay for it themselves. It's about $2,500.
Now, you've mentioned the basic qualifications in terms of someone who is desirous of becoming, a law enforcement officer. And I know there are other things that you can't measure, but for people, since you have over 20 years experience, Pastor Edwards has, over 20, actually about 20 years experience as well. What kind of a heart does it take for someone to really and truly get into this? Because, you're talking about somebody that's going to be walking around carrying a gun eventually. You're talking about somebody who may actually have to kill someone. And I know at a certain point in time you were actually faced with that, Louie. So it's not just a job for anybody.
Right. I want to share this and ask Louie to do this because, first of all, people think just wearing a badge and gun is all that they do. First of all, it takes a special person to be able to deal with the different crises that a police officer has to deal with. A police officer has to be a counselor. He has to be a mother, father, at the same time, he has to have trust from the community. You said something about a police officer has the power to take people's rights from them, to arrest them, to even kill them if it becomes a violent crime. Louie Mercer was my commander for 5 years at the Daytona Beach Police Department. And I can remember the night that he had to take a life in the line of duty. He stopped a bank robbery during bike week. And the guy was armed. Louie didn't know he had robbed the bank. He thought that the guy was broke down. And the guy was actually waiting on Louie to approach his door with his gun out. And Louie shot and killed the suspect. I think about that night because I was on duty that night, and Louie called me to advise me that he had been involved in a shooting. And you know, when the shooting occurs, FDLE has to come out, and Louie sent me to the house to notify his wife that he had been involved in a shooting. Police officers are special people. However, they're human. For instance, we have police officers back then when I was working there that would come to work an 8 or 12-hour shift, but didn't have lunch money. How can you work a 8 or 12-hour shift, people complaining in your face, resisting arrest, cussing you out, and you haven't had a meal? So we did not to embarrass the officer, we came together, and police officers have to sacrifice their families. I remember when the fires broke out in 98
and 85.
and Louie's house burnt down. And his wife called him and says, I want you home. I don't want to be here by myself. And Louie called me in the office and he says, what do I do? I said, you have a responsibility. You're the patrol commander. You're the last one going home. And now we're going to go get your wife out. And it's things like that. But it takes dedication. That spouse has to be understanding. It's a 24/7 thing, and especially when you're in the command staff. But one of the things that police officers, people don't see police officers, they don't see them as human. They figure because they have a badge and gun. I would never eat a donut in uniform. Because kids used to kid us. They think when we go get coffee, they would go like, you know you want the donut, get the donut. Y'all get it free. And so things like, we learn from the dressing of the uniform. I think the city of Daytona Beach pays for their officers' uniforms to be clean. Because if they didn't, you'd be seeing wrinkled uniforms, people dirty uniforms, because officers are living. They have to live on what they're being paid. When I say that they're human, a lot of people think that they don't get family problems. They have family problems. We have officers that actually contemplated suicide. I had my relationship with the psychiatrist at the police department. I learned when an officer would pull me to the side and says, Chaplain, I need to talk to you. I have to do it right then. Because I learned from before, when you let it go, we had one officer needed some help. And I was busy that day when he needed the help. And he said to me, Chaplain, can I talk to you? I said, I'll get back to you. 24 hours later, he was contemplating suicide. I had officers call me at the middle of the night. And you'd have to have a relationship with the command staff, knowing that this officer gave me his gun so he didn't eat it last night. I says, hey, take the next 3 days off. I'll get with the commander, just tell him you're sick. And I hold a gun. I've had people say, well, how can I go out and I don't have food in my house? We would go out and buy groceries. Guys would tip in, but we never gave up the guy that didn't have food. Because they're human beings just like anybody else. They get cars repossessed. They get their house foreclosed on if they don't pay the bills. So it's a thing. I became very close. Louie came over and cooked for you when you were sick, because I couldn't cook.
Which I appreciate, right?
And it's to me, you got to be a parent to kids when you don't have kids. And in Louie's case, he had kids. And we're very close to Louie's family. His girls, we've known them since they were in the world. But I want to share this story about his family, and I'll turn it back over to Louie. They called me Uncle Larry. And the girls, as they were coming up, even when Louie left the police department, when he would have to discipline his little girls, he would have me go to school in uniform. And says, your daddy sent me to check on you. And I remember the little girls asked me, and I think they were 5 and 6 years old, I guess, 5 or 6 years old. They says, Uncle Larry, why are you darker than we are? And she says, Daddy told us why. And I said, and why? What did he tell you? He said, God left you in the oven longer than he left us in. And the kids just grew up. I have, you know, the bicycle. I had a problem with the air pump.
You've always had a problem.
I've always, the kids moved out of the neighborhood and they says, Uncle Larry has to have a air pump. And Louie says, so what are y'all gonna do about it? They went in their piggy bank, broke the bank open, he took them to Walmart and bought me an air pump. And they leave a note on the door and they says, Uncle Larry, we're moving out of the neighborhood. You're gonna need an air pump. And they bought me an air pump. They've given their bicycles to kids at our churches. And Louis taught them this, him and his wife. But that's all part of family life. I married police officers. I buried police officers. I've counseled officers that have committed crimes. Okay? They're human beings. Temptation when you're out there and you don't have it and it looks like you can get away with it, some people is not as honorable. And Daytona has a sign on the door, through these doors walk Daytona's finest. How many times have we passed that sign, Lord?
Yeah.
How many times we've had to cry together? How many times we had to pray together? When racial tension happens, Black College Reunion was something else. We worked, but at the point, you had to have a partnership. It's not about the color of people's skin, it's what's on the inside. How you treat one another, how you wanted to be treated. People didn't like ministers being on the street. Thank God, I worked for 4 chiefs, and every one of those chiefs supported ministers being out. The Adams Mark, when they had the riot there, when they tore that hotel up, Louis, you was on duty.
Yep.
Sheriff Vogel was the sheriff. Chief Ken Small had just came in as police chief. I told him, pull your policemen out, pull your police officers out. Give me 20 of my ministers and I'll go clear that hotel. I cleared that hotel within an hour. Not one arrest had to be made because people still do respect clergy. How I got at the police department, Howard Tipton hired me. When I came back to Daytona Beach from Kansas after being shot, the Lord led me to Howard Tipton's office. I believe Chief Willis was the chief there. And as I got there, I said to Mr. Tipton, God sent me here. And he told me he was a Christian man, so we prayed. And I said, you're going to give me a job. He says, doing what? I said, the police job. He hired me, well, let's see, no, I'm sorry. I don't want, one more story, I'll let you get it. I just thought about this.
This is what happens when you get involved with a preacher.
Yes, right, absolutely.
And by the way, Louis is a preacher also. I told him 10 years ago that he was going to be preaching. And he's
a lot of
preaching.
hassle with it.
Amen. And then, but I remember this, my relationship with Paul Crow, who hired me as the first full-time police chaplain. Paul Crow was giving me money out of his pocket so I could eat because I didn't have a job then. When they hired me, I worked 3 years part-time, volunteer. They hired me at my first salary at $18,000 a year. I was on call 24/7. I, as police chaplain, wanted to be on the scene. I was responsible for homicide, fires, traffic fatalities, because when you go tell a loved one what's happened to their loved one, they don't want somebody that don't have the information. Why are you here? And that was part of my job. But this story about Paul Crow made lieutenant before he became chief. Howard Tipton was the city manager. And I remember it says a lieutenant with 6 months or better experience. Crow had been a lieutenant 3 months. And he says, Larry, I really want this job and they won't take my application. I told him, go back and give it to Howard Tipton. Howard Tipton is a Christian, he'll be fair. He prayed the night that he hired Crow as chief. Crow called me and said, I'm now your new boss. But prayer changes things. Every policeman I know had family problems, especially with their children. But it's how you dedicate it. When an officer says, Reverend Edwards, I need to give you my gun because I'm threatening to shoot myself, I got to go get that gun, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's in my trunk. Come on, Louie, I'll give it back to you. I'll be preaching
hey,
before
this is a preacher.
But Gwen, I think your question was, what kind of person does it take to be a police officer?
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to be a police officer. I mean, I'm still a police officer. I'm proud to be associated with the Daytona Beach Police Department. I'm proud that I'm involved with training police officers. And it takes a lot to be a police officer today. I mean, it takes a lot to be one at any time. I always looked up to police officers, young chief in the city of Bunnell when I grew up, Wilford Hunter. He was a role model. He was a good guy, and I wanted to be like that. And I want people, when recruits come out of Daytona State College, I want people to look at them and say, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
It takes a big heart. It takes a servant's heart. Yes, with the economy the way it has been, people look at public service pensions and think maybe something needs to be done with them, but they weren't looking at them 10 years ago because the economy was racing. So it takes the right kind of person with the right kind of bent, the right kind of attitude to be a good, effective police officer. I mean, anybody can go to work, but if you love the job, and I love the job, I loved every part of it. I love the people. I like being around them. I like making things happen. It was fun. You have to have the right attitude, and that is a thing that's an intangible. It's very hard to measure. Yeah, you can take tests that show that sort of thing, but the truth of the matter is when they walk in the doors at Daytona State College, what I do is I provide opportunities for them, for higher education, for exposure to be whatever they think they can be. And as long as they meet statutory requirements and the advisory board, the police chiefs and sheriffs of our area, as long as they are in sync, I'm in sync with them, doing what they want, I'm going to train every single person I can and let the employment market figure out which one will have the best fit for which agency.
Now, police, when I was city clerk, one of the things that I noted, and I think Pastor Larry Edwards actually agreed with this, is that there's a military style, a mindset that goes with law enforcement that helps in many ways to discipline, to keep everybody in line so that they understand protocols and all of that. If you would speak to that for a moment. And then secondly, when we talk about what it takes to be a police officer, and we've shared that to a certain extent, but there's also an impact on the family.
Yeah.
Because it really requires kind of a buy-in from those who are close to you as well, because they too, even though it's that person who's taking the job, they too are a part of that job in many ways, because as Pastor Edwards was talking about, there are times when they work these long shifts. Many times when that law enforcement officer leaves the house, they don't know, just like 9/11, if they're going to return. I mean, and those are some of the intangible things that it's difficult sometimes to share with and pass on to family members.
You got things that are happening today. When you say military, Louie, I remember when we couldn't get out of the car unless we put our hat on.
Yep.
You would have to be military dressed. If you got out of the car, you had to put your hat on. If you were at an accident scene, you would have to cover your head. But now they wear short pants, they're in shorts, and we had a winter uniform, and you had a summer uniform. And while I'm thinking about it, Louie, while he was talking about the college, the Eddie Taylor Endowment Scholarship, Eddie was a sergeant who died, not in the line of duty, but Louie was patrol commander. Eddie was also a minister pastor in Jacksonville for some 15 years, but he drove back and forth every Sunday to be back to his work at Daytona Beach Police Department. So I went to Louie and said, we need to do something to honor Eddie's memory. So we started an endowment, $10,000 I believe it was, $10,000 endowment scholarship for any minority that goes in law enforcement that applies for that. It would help them with the office costs of school. So I think y'all still have that, correct?
Still have it, still use it.
And that's been over 15 years ago.
Yep. And you know, you talk about the uniforms, it's not what, you can debate uniforms and paramilitary, it's not really what's on the outside that counts if you want to be a good police officer, it's what's on the inside. And so, yes, there is a paramilitary dimension to policing, and there's a reason for that, because there's rules, there's chain of command, there's orders that have to be given, and there's procedures that have to be followed. And a lot of times, police officers will be interchangeable from one site to the next, and they have to follow that chain of command, that line, those lines of authority. It's very important. It's really a safe place to be. It's in the box. And, that speaks more to self-discipline than anything else. How you're going to live your life, how you're going to be yourself. And and what you're going to decide to do with your life and your job, regardless of what you look like. And I'll tell you, policing does have a big impact on families. Police officers, the divorce rate for police officers is 3 times higher than what it is for the general population. They're more prone to be alcohol or drug addicted later in life, and they're also about 3 times more likely to commit suicide because of their access to weapons. So these are national statistics that come out with impacts. I mean, it's the Christmases, it's the Thanksgivings, it's the basketball games, the soccer games. It's those things that a lot of folks take for granted, that somebody's got to man the wall, and somebody's got to staff at it. There are many husbands and wives in policing that it's a self-sacrifice. Yes, it's a job, and everybody's got a job, but there's a lot of other things you could do that maybe aren't as demanding. The folks in policing, they chose it. The folks in policing, they wanted it. They know what it takes. They know what to expect. And if it's something that they get into and find out they can't handle it, well, then they move on. And it's just not a good fit for them. But the majority of them, they stay with it, and they like the paramilitary organization. There's a young girl that just started in recruit school. I know her father. I've known her and her father for many, many years. And she said something to one of my older daughters that it was neat because she's in a uniform. She's a college student in a uniform. There's this whole ROTC thing. Well, you see, people want discipline. They want order. They want structure. We provide that in college in our training programs. The profession of policing provides that. It's a good feeling. If you've never been in the military or in policing or in some sort of organization that had clear lines and structure, things that were built upon each other, it's a good feeling. It's a nice place to be.
I'm on the advisory committee of Holly Hill Police Chief. We run where we advise chief on different things in the community. And I want to commend Chief Barker on the program he just started in Holly Hill just a week ago, where police officers, they had to arrest 2 of their officers for domestic battery. So he said, well, what do you do? What are we going to do when people have these problems? So they've come up with a hotline 24 hours a day at their department where you can call in, whether you're with Holly Hill or another, as long as it's not a criminal offense, and you call and say, I'm drunk, I need a ride home. Somebody will come and get you. They have a number that you can call if you're saying, I'm contemplating suicide. They're going to get you with a counselor tonight. And I think a lot of departments are going to this because police officers, as you know, Louie, don't want to cry for help.
No, they don't. And, it's an ego thing. Most people, don't want to cry for help.
Because they think they're robots. They feel that I got this authority.
Invincible.
And nobody can hurt me, but it's common sense. Louie had not had his gun out that night. When he walked up to that car, he would have been history. But at the same time, his training, it goes back to the training. Even though he thought the car, he calls out with what he thought was a broke down car. And here's this guy laying with his gun, waiting on Louie to approach, and he had robbed a bank early that day, which Louie had no clue. But he went home that night. And when police officers, I've been involved in counseling police officers out of shooting. And Louie, when we used to have a shooting, FBLE used to not allow anybody to go in there and talk to the officer. Well, I thought that was just the coldest thing that happened. They had that officer that had just been involved in a shooting, and he can't talk to anybody. Well, at our department, they allow me to go in there with him. And I would be able to tell them, you're going home tonight. I remember 4 officers we had doing BCR. You were commanding in. We had 4 police officers shot doing BCR. The suspect happened to be black that night. We had another shooting on the west side.
It was a busy night.
It was a busy night. And on the way to the west side, I'm praying, Lord, don't let this be a black man. Because people would have took it that we're shooting black folk tonight. When we got there, the officer killed a guy. He had one of the, what do they call the thing, ankle bracelet on. Yep. He breaks in the store with a crowbar. He came at the officer, and the officer killed him. He said, Reverend Edwards, he came in with me with the crowbar and says, you're going home tonight. You're going to your family tonight. Because of the training that they had. And I'm sure when an officer, when they got to react, now people ask you even ask this question, why don't they shoot him in the arm? Why don't they shoot him? When a police officer's in a shootout, he's going to hit you wherever he can hit you. It's not, well, Louis, I remember we used to go shoot cans. You don't sit there and say, I'm gonna take it. I'm sure when you were in that shootout that night, you didn't say I'm aiming it. You hit him until he.
Well, we're trained to shoot at center mass because it's the biggest target. And it's just stressful being in the shooting, there's no doubt about it. It's hard to hit a can sometimes. But we're trained to shoot center mass. And you don't shoot unless you fear for your life or the life of someone else. And when you shoot, you're shooting that center mass to make an impact on that threat, to stop that threat from going any further or hurting anyone else. And on TV it looks good when they shoot the gun out of the hand, and some snipers have shot guns out of hands, but the largest majority of shootings, generally the suspect has practiced. Research shows that the suspect practices more than what the police officers do. They're less worried, the suspects are less worried about when they're in a shooting, what the consequences of their actions are going to be, because they're criminals. They're not worried about where any stray bullets are going to go or their field of fire where police officers are. They're not worried about any civil implications because they know if they don't survive this shooting, they're not going to go, and they are trying to shoot a police officer. So it's a big difference between the two using force. The police officers use a force that is given to them by state statute, by law, by moral code.
Would you share with them when a police officer shoots his gun, how he's taught them? Listen, do you shoot once? Do you shoot twice and then hold back, or what?
Used to, the training was to shoot 2 times, bam, 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 bam. But now pretty much the shooting training is you shoot until the threat is diminished.
Okay.
However long that is. It may be 1 shot, it may be more. And I know that often cops are criticized.
How many times you shot?
Yeah, because some empty their guns. Is that?
Well, that night of the shooting, one officer was on the SWAT team. You have 17 bullets in the magazine. He said, Reverend Edwards, I emptied my magazine and I reloaded because that guy had shot him. And when he was shooting this suspect on the ground, the body was jumping up and down like,
So he didn't know if
he was going to be. So he shot him until he didn't move anymore.
And the research is pretty clear. In stressful situations, you have, auditory exclusion. You get where you can't hear things as well. You're so focused, you get tunnel vision. Your thought processes go from really fine motor skills to gross motor skills. That your body does things to protect you when you're being shot. Think of these young men and women that are overseas, involved in protecting our country, and the things that they're seeing. I mean, it's traumatic. So it's hard to shoot somebody's arm or leg. It's hard to know how many times you've shot. Sometimes they'll ask you, how many times did you shoot? The officers just don't know because they don't remember.
A police officer wants to go home just like anybody else. I remember before you went to the Glocks, when they had the 38s and the 357, Daytona officers weren't allowed to put 357s in their 38s. They used to inspect your gun before you went on the street. Those guys would go out to their cars, take the 38 bullets out, put the 357s or some hot loads in.
Well, now the litmus test there will be if you get a shooting.
You're going to
be up. But it's even now the escalation of weapons and the escalation of force that not only police officers face, but the citizens face, and school teachers face. This whole force escalation. I'm not going to get into whether we should or should not have guns in America because I carry a gun almost all the time. It's not because I'm afraid of anything. It's just who I am. It's part of what I do.
That's Pastor Larry.
I carry my gun all the time because my thing is I think God wants you to have common sense. If you go in a restaurant and the man starts shooting everybody in the restaurant and you say, excuse me, let me go out the car to get my gun, I don't think he's going to give you time to go to the car to get your gun. And I always think, what would happen, you got your family members with you and you couldn't protect them. People say, well, you're a preacher and you got a gun? I said, yeah, I got 66 bullets, then I got 17 Glock. Now, and I want to say that, when Jesus was on earth, he didn't hang out at the Hilton. He hung out on the avenue with the brothers, meaning men, women, because he knew what was out there. But at the same time, I said, God wants you to have common sense. If you know somebody's shooting at that door and you walk out the parking lot, and you know they're shooting, well, hey, that's bad common sense, and you walk out there.
Well, there, you know, Jesus said, be in the world and not of the world.
Right.
So, the weapons, they've escalated. Force has gotten much, much greater. It's a difficult place to live.
What would you do if some burglar come in your house?
Well, I don't know until that minute happens.
But I don't think you're gonna go to praying.
No, I won't.
Okay, and that's me. I believe that I would have to protect my home, protect my family members.
But see, everybody's not like you and I. I mean, if somebody comes in someone else's home that doesn't have a weapon and they're not trained, I wouldn't advocate that anybody that is not trained and very proficient in it, they shouldn't have it. I don't think everybody should go home and buy a gun.
Right.
Wait for the burglar to come. If the burglar comes, call 911 and let the people that are paid and trained to handle it and do what they say.
Because you may end up hurting yourself or a loved one.
Or the law enforcement hurt you.
Yeah.
Because they're not gonna say, oh, you had the gun for the bad guy. You came out the door and that officer felt threatened because you got your weapon. So
Now, law enforcement, there are some who say they get a bad rap. There are some who say that, they get the rap that they deserve, whatever. But I can remember, especially when when both of my parents died, there was a police escort. And in particular, my father, when he passed, law enforcement community came together, and a lot of them cooked food, brought it by the house. I got a police escort, actually, because I was a city official, but, police escort even to the city where the funeral was being held, and they stood guard there, and we got the escort to the cemetery and the like. And I can tell you that, and the same thing was able to be arranged for my secretary when her father died. And those types of things, those memories of what law enforcement did for you during your time of sorrow, the time of mourning, those are things that just stay with you forever. And I can remember even when I was campaigning and they asked me about law enforcement, and I said that was just something that I will never, ever, ever forget. That type of service that was given during my time of loss. And I know that that's not now always done, that a lot of police departments have really gotten away from that. And there are good reasons for it, but...
Let me share a good reason for you. We've had a lot of officers injured, taking somebody to the cemetery. You used to do that at school. Riding on a motor, you're flying through the intersection to take the dead person, put them in the ground. You're running lights. We've had officers injured, and guess what? Workers' comp ain't gonna cover them the rest of their life. And when you say that you saw that beautiful escort, but they don't talk about the officers that were injured while doing even escorting the president. We've had officers injured in Orange County, Seminole County, escorting him because somebody pulled out. Louie, you've been off the motor a few times.
There's two kind of people that ride police motorcycles, or any motorcycle. Those that have gone down and those that are going to go down. Gwen, the face of policing, just like school, just like government, just like a lot of professions, is changing. And some of the things that you used to do, you have to look at, you have to evaluate, you just have to see if it still makes sense, see if it's still good to do. And just because you've always done it is not a good mantra to carry on with. You got to say, well, let's just take a look at that. And these injuries that Larry has talked about, that has been one of the reasons that these sort of things have been looked at. What is this being done for? Do we have the resources to see it? Also, you got to understand that the budgets and municipal and state and federal government, they've been reduced. So the things that you used to could do, you just don't have the resources to do it. It's a matter of prioritization, where we can't do this any longer because we don't have the funding, we don't have the staffing, we don't have the time, and it's just worked out. And just like you, I mean, I've done plenty of escorts, and I really wanted to honor those folks where someone has died. Yes, somebody that is of political promise, but also the person that doesn't have anybody else. And we'd pick them up from Herbert Thompson Funeral Home, and we'd escort them to the cemetery at Mount Ararat, and we would give them honor. Policing is a service-oriented job. You
Right.
can't get away from it. You know, policing has changed a lot, but one thing that hasn't changed about policing is that it's still a hard job. There's still bad folks out there. And you know, it says on the side of the cars, that can be, oh, protect and serve. You see, that still fits today. These young recruits at Daytona State College, they gotta know it. It's a service-oriented job. And if you're in it for anything other than that, you may have to readjust your attitude, because it's not riding fast cars and jacking people around. It's not it.
You know, one of the privileges that I really enjoyed was taking our officers to funerals outside of Daytona Beach. We were allowed to go to a funeral where an officer was killed in the line of duty in a 500-mile race. I would take at least 4 to 6 motors to every funeral. And it did not matter what the patch. People would remember, you came from Miami, you came to Miami from Daytona Beach, they'll never forget that. And the joy that it gave those officers to participate, because that's our extended family. And you were there to support them.
Right.
And I applaud the chiefs that allowed the departments to do that, because it's something when you go, you ever saw when an officer got killed in the line of duty, you don't see the stores closing up. They go on with business, just like probably even the store that he was protecting, they're still in business and won't go to the funeral. Most funerals where a law enforcement officer is killed is people that's in law enforcement. It is a beautiful thing when you see that lining of the streets when the officer is being taken to the cemetery. But guess what? That officer can't see it. He's done his job, served honorable, gave his life for citizens.
But the family can, and based on the fact and truth that the family member of that officer is almost as strongly impacted by what he or she does as that officer, because they're the ones too who are waiting up at night, waiting for he or she to come home. They're the ones too who, when and if they're shot, or when and if they're talked about, or whatever else, that impacts them as well. It's not just the officer. And as a result of that, the honor that they're given when they die, when they're killed in the line of duty or whatever, I think it's just as much out of respect for them as it is out of respect for their family, to let their family know just how much they appreciate what it is that they've done.
So I respect law enforcement agencies that work together, because I remember a couple shootings that we had, a couple times that we had officers.
Hold that thought. You're listening to Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards. My guests are Louie Mercer, Director of Emergency Services, Daytona State College, and Pastor Larry T. Edwards, Reverend Edwards, who is a former Daytona Beach Police Chaplain. And we're talking about law enforcement yesterday and today. This is WLE 1380 AM on your radio dial in Ormond Beach, Florida. Also Big and Goliath Radio. All right. Thank you.
Where did that leave off? You cut me off.
You were talking about the cost of the families, and it's
Yeah,
a big
yeah.
fabric, and there are a lot of costs for that, and that's part of the job.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the family can have the funeral the way they want it, not the way the police department wants it. A lot of people get mad about that. They says, why didn't the chief do so and so? It's not the chief's call. It's the family. The family's entitled to have that funeral the way they want to have it. But we have to keep those families in prayer. I remember Chief Ken Small, who's retiring from Los Angeles, Huntington Beach, California in a few months, this month I believe. But I remember Ken Small, we went to do a death notification of an officer killed in the line of duty. And on the ride up from Daytona to Ormond, he asked me the question, Reverend, what do I say? What do I say to this lady when I get to the... Well, guess what? When we got there, Ken choked up. He couldn't do it. I had to take over. And when you make a death notification, some folk go in denial. In this particular case, the wife was in denial. She started beating me. You don't know my husband like I know him. And we had been to a funeral together the day before. The pain that they were feeling, because they didn't want it to be true, that their loved one was killed in the line of duty. Why? Why my husband? And when I say Ken choked up, everybody can deliver death notification. That's one of the trainings I used to get to do at Daytona Beach Police Department. Train officers what to do on the scene. How do you make a death notification? You don't just walk in, and the reason we got into death notification, you don't call somebody on the phone that says, hey, Joe just got killed, you need to call the police department. We actually, I responded to 100 death notifications and calls a year. Not only did the city of Daytona Beach, I would do it for Florida Highway Patrol or any other agency that requested me, because they knew that my heart was in what I was doing. And I just believe that you should have the facts to be able to inform the family members, whether it be a law enforcement or be Joe citizen. They should have the information to tell them what happened, even if it's a suicide, no matter how graphic it is. And Louie, you remember the kid that was run over and the head was decaffeinated from the train wreck. I said to the mother, you don't want to see that child like that. You know what she said to me? Do you have a child? She said, that's my baby, and I want to hold her. I took her to the morgue. She held that baby without the head on. But guess what? It gave her closure. She wrote me a letter saying, had I not let her do that, she would not have had closure. So what's graphic to some folk are not graphic to those loved ones.
And, you know, besides the negative side of it, there are some positives as well in terms of the job, not just in terms of the joy, the satisfaction that law enforcement officers get in doing their job, but there are opportunities to advance their education. There are opportunities to even do programs that work with youth and the like. Expand on those positives, other positives that you get in law enforcement or that you can participate in, the opportunities.
In my opinion, there's the positives in a law enforcement career far outweigh the negatives. Yeah, you got some shift work and you have some holiday work, and you got to roll up your sleeves and get down with some folks from time to time. But I'm going to tell you, the opportunity to be a police officer, you get to see things that most people never get to see. You get to be places most people never get to be. You have the authority to take people's freedom, and that is an awesome responsibility, and it needs to be taken. When you have that responsibility and you understand that you do, it's such an awe-inspiring feeling. You get to help people at the lowest moments when they need help. They're calling you, and you go there with the right attitude saying, I can help you, I can fix this. The gratitude that you get from that is phenomenal. It's indescribable. And yeah, there are a lot of opportunities to deal with at-risk youth. They're everywhere. The families in America are broken. And you see it in schools, you see it in churches, you see it everywhere. Policing is a way to do that. Look at the Powell Center in Daytona that's going on. I mean, how beautiful that is. When I was there today getting my car serviced up at John Hall, Chevrolet, and drove by there. It's a beautiful place.
It's not Powell anymore.
It's not Powell anymore.
And that's the problem where I see things with Captain Capri, Craig Capri. He's a perfect example of a good police officer.
He's a fine man.
He came up through the projects. He came up as a part-time officer working with latchkey kids. And now he's a commander, on captain on the police department. But he paid the bill. We have now police officers traveling with the Bethune-Cookman College football team. Myself and Capri did that for 15 years. And let me say how you can start relationships. Do you know how we started getting this with Bethune-Cookman? They had a homicide. And this is important to me because the state attorney at the time came to me when I was at the police department and said, we have a homicide, the football players witness it, and they won't tell the story. I went to the coach, I said, we can make this a partnership. I'm going to make you a hero tonight. And I'm going to get our police department to work with you. That born the relationship of traveling with the football team. And the homicide was solved at the same time. It's a partnership. No matter what you have going on, you got to be, and you got to have communication skills. That's what's important. Communication skills and trust of a police officer. If you can't communicate with people, like I used to do, what do we call on-the-job training. When somebody gets in your face and says, I'm finna take you out, they don't mean they're taking you on a date. They're finna knock the hell out of you. If you ain't got common sense to know the difference, the boy's gonna hit you in the face. Am I right?
That's right.
So communication is important. And people can tell when you're afraid, And that's why I love that scripture says we walk by faith and not by sight. Because there are times that you're scared. I don't know why people think of the policeman got a gun on and there's supposed to be somebody in their house, that he ain't scared when he goes in there. He's human. And I say he and she's as well.
Mm-hmm.
When the city of Daytona Beach, when I went to work for them in '78, I had a 2-year degree and was making $202 a week. I was able to get a master's degree from public administration at the University of Central Florida that the city paid for through the educational program.
Mm-hmm.
Got to attend thousands of hours of in-service training. I got to meet people from all over the world, and I got to help people. You know, it's the person that needs help that you can find that intersection of the person's need and the solution somewhere in the community and put them together. It's satisfying. There was good health benefits. There was good leadership. There was a good model to follow after. I mean, you work for the city for a long time. I enjoy the city. I still do. I still love it. And I love the leadership. Best of luck to the new mayor and the commission. I want them to do well in all these cities. So policing is a fun job. All of Volusia, Flagler County, our service area, they are really some, when you travel the state and look like I do, they are some of the finest men and women police officers that you would ever want to see in your life.
Mm-hmm. And many of them are giving back to the community through some type of community service activity or whatever else.
Yeah, we have the police officers in the academy, they kind of do a public service project each class. There's one right now, the class is going through that a lady ended up having a son. It was in the newspaper a few days ago. A lady had a son that was having breathing difficulties. He pulled up to the ATC. These officers were just being trained that night by one of my paramedic instructors on first aid. The police officer recruits were able to help. The paramedic instructor came out, rendered aid, called 911, got them transported. Then come to find out, this young lady is in our community. She's homeless with 3 children. She's in transition. I mean, how many people do you know that are in transition in one part or another of their life? The Academy group came to me today, and what they want to do for their project is work with some local businesses to make sure that she has got a good Thanksgiving for her and her family. That was just approved, this afternoon.
When she came out and thanked the officers for doing. And you know, people, again, that's about giving back to the community. And then you see people at the holiday time, they become depressed. They have nobody to reach out to like these kids are reaching out to this family member. There have been times when an officer, I remember St. Pete killed a kid's father in St. Pete. They wanted to do something for the kids, so they came over here and paid for them to go to college. Not admitting they did anything wrong, but here's a kid without a father. He's out there on the street. They paid for him, and that kid's now a major in one of the law enforcement agencies.
So Larry, the book that you read says that the greatest among us will be your servant. And that's what policing is, to protect, to stand against the wall, to do the dirty jobs that a lot of people don't want to do or can't do, and to serve. The greatest among you will be your servant. And that's why it's so fun. I still love the police culture. I love the police profession. I love everything about it. Are there some things that maybe need to be done better and changed? Yep. But unless you're in there trying to make it better, either be quiet or pitch in and help.
Get on board.
Get on board.
In our final few minutes, because we've tried to give the not just information on how they're trained, basic training, and what it takes to be law enforcement, and the impact on the family and the like, and community service. But there are, I'm sure, since both of you have had many years, over 15, 20 years in law enforcement, there are times when, as compassionate a person as you are, you're faced with situations where people show their worst side, And since you guys have been in law enforcement and you've experienced, I'm sure, the good, the bad, the ugly, but you're also both now, you know, ministers, you're reverends. And what would you say to our listening audience or people in the community who don't always, you know, show the best of respect when it comes to law enforcement? Besides what we've already shared, to kind of help them understand why it's important to be as supportive as you can to our law enforcement officers.
I think that when you make, I'll give you an incident when you were a city clerk, the police department towed a lady's car that was parked illegally. They towed her car, and the car cost, the record bill cost more than the car was worth. We made headlines, police picking on an old lady. This lady's 80 years old. I got with Daytona Record. I said, I need y'all to, she had a flat tire, that's why I was. They put a new tire on her. I brought her to your office. She had to pay for that parking ticket. But at the same time, we warned somebody. Ken Small, I know officers, Ken Small with the fishing pole, they broke into the house, the police did, kicked the door down, broke the man's only fishing rod. Chief took $50 out, took me to go to the pawn shop, buy the man a couple poles. The man was happy. What do? You try to make a difference in somebody's life. Louie, you remember when kids said, you said to the kids in Pine Haven back in the day, what do you want? They want a safe place to play. Here's one lady I remember says, I'd like to get a decent night's sleep before I go to heaven. What we do, we go clean the street, we move them 3 streets over. The lady go sleep tonight. That's the kind of things that makes a difference. And I think that every police officer, I respect that every police officer wears the badge. And there comes a time it's tarnished because police officers get bad raps. The chiefs and sheriffs get bad rap, but they're the leaders. And you're responsible the same way we're in the church. It's how we lead. And if you lead and you got bad apples and you're not dealing with the bad apples, it reflects you. So all police officers are not bad, and all of them ain't good. Because there's some bad folk, that's some bad garbage, man. So we just have to be prayerful that I'm like Louie, I love Daytona Beach Police Department. I started hanging out at Daytona Beach Police Department in 1964 when I was a school safety patrolman. I got a free trip to Washington from holding that pole out every day, saying hold up. But I was serving back then the school safety patrol. John Kennedy was the president when I went to Washington. Integration was not as popular back then. And I thank God for Lieutenant Muffaletta because they tried to beat me out of my trip to Washington because I was black. Because they had not sent black kids to Washington before. Chief Folsom was the chief of police, God bless him, he's dead and gone now. They took me to Washington and they said, we want you to behave yourself. Well, y'all know how I am. I'm a curiosity guy. John Kennedy and Chief Folsom were talking on the White House steps. And President Kennedy reached out for me to come to him. And he took and put me in his lap and held me, and that's the picture that came back in the news journal. Look at the opportunities God has allowed me. We didn't say much about racism, but racism exists, and police officers can't take sides. They're there to be fair. And that's important. So I say in my closing, keep hope alive. Be fair. We used to say, have that integrity, the guts, and give God the glory, and you will be a successful law enforcement officer.
Well, it comes down to the individual choice of each individual officer, how they're going to act and react. If the badge gets tarnished, I say, it's part of the job, take it off, polish it up, pick yourself back up, realize that you might have made a mistake, just like everybody else in life. Don't quit. Keep going. Amen?
Amen. Amen. Well, this has been a great show, and I knew having the two of you on there, you know, from law enforcement background and also being reverends and ministers, that I wouldn't have much to say, but it really has
that way.
I'm sure. But I do appreciate both of you. I do appreciate the service that you've given to your communities, to this county, this state, this nation. And I appreciate too law enforcement. I know sometimes they get behind me and I have to slow down a little bit, but I still really, really and truly appreciate the great job that they do, and all of the things that they continually do. You know, it's not just being out there with a gun, going after the criminal all the time. It's also doing those things that really help people, and they help people every single day. And I know the prayer of every family member of a law enforcement officer is that, you know, when they hug them and kiss them goodbye in the morning or at night, that they're going to see them, that they're going to return home. And that's important to them. It's important to all of us. So we would say to our law enforcement community, thank you for the great job that you do. Thank you for all that you do in protecting and serving all of us. And we thank, Louie, we thank your establishment, the Advanced Technical Academy, is that correct?
Advanced Technical College, Daytona State College.
Right, for the training that you give and the opportunities that the individuals, and they aren't always teenagers, you know, and I mean above 19 or close to it, in their 20s and the like. Sometimes they're older. There are people who come back from the service who want to also participate. But for all of those men and women who do get involved in law enforcement, we just say thank you, thank you, thank you. We know it's not easy. We know sometimes we don't make it easy, but we thank you for hanging in there and doing the best job that you can do. So many thanks to Larry Edwards, Pastor Edwards, the pastor of St. John Missionary Baptist Church Incorporated, 1734 Hollow Hill, Florida. That's 1734 State Avenue, Hollow Hill, Florida. To Louie Mercer, Director of Emergency Services at Daytona State College. And I don't know if you want to give a shout out to the church you're involved with.
Living Cornerstone, 1835 Taylor Road, Port Orange, Florida.
All right, all right. Oh, God is so good. He really is truly, truly wonderful. And we thank both of you again for being on the show. And we would say to all of you, remember to join us every Thursday night, starting at 6:15, as we discuss issues to not only inform and empower you, but also to bless you, I think, you our listeners, because information and knowledge is power. And as always, I want to empower you to take control. Take control. Be sure to go to the website at www.gwen-truth.com. Until next time, be informed, be empowered, stand tall for that which is right and truthful. And like these gentlemen, Reverend Larry Edwards, Reverend Louie Mercer, Director Mercer, hey, we're still standing. You be blessed and have a great and fantastic week.
Truth with your host, Gwen Azama-Edwards, exclusively every Thursday night on WELE 1380.